When it comes to your partnership or the XRPL integration, I'm curious if you could expand a bit more on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we've been working on something with Ripple for a long time, and we wanted it to be a little bit more holistic. Obviously, Ripple's working on a lot of different things. I think the things that's really interesting to us is I think in the past, if we're being a little bit honest, they've gotten a lot of flack for just, I'm a big fan. So XRP Army, please hold any like,
you have to disclaim before mentioning any sort of throwing any shade at the
yeah.
army. Are there any specific chains or ecosystems within that are seeing the most growth and strong wormhole usage?
Yeah, I would say one of our bigger corridors is actually
another part of of wormhole. Big component, of course, is, and that no doubt many people who are watching are concerned about, is the wormhole's W token, right? I'm curious now, in terms of as it is currently, how does the governance component work with the token? And then are you thinking about other use cases you want to attach to the token to allow holders to accrue value in some way? GM, and welcome back to another interview here on More Coin Bureau. Now, today we are being joined by Robinson Burkey, who is the co-founder of the Wormhole Foundation. It's one of the biggest, Wormhole is one of the biggest cross-chain bridges in crypto. So, Robinson, welcome to the Coin Bureau.
GM, Nick, thank you for having me. I am coming to you more or less live from New York, where we just opened up our headquarters. So really excited to be on the show today.
Back in the States. Crypto's back in the US.
We're back.
Made in the USA. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, guys, but firstly, a quick few disclaimers. Nothing in this interview is financial or investment advice, so please see the disclaimers below in the description. And also do note, in full disclosure, the Coin Bureau is also an investor in Wormhole. So with that out of the way, let's dive in first with a bit of background, Robinson. So can you just take us through your background specifically, how you got into crypto? That's always very interesting for viewers. And then more specifically, how this led to you founding the Wormhole.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been in crypto professionally for, I would say, about 5 years now. My pill moment, and I don't know if I should maybe admit things like this, but I guess I grew up in the U.S. for those listening, and here you can't drink till you're 21, so it's quite popular to get a fake ID. And there was actually a site back in the day. It was called ID Chief, where you could get a fake ID and you actually paid in Bitcoin. And so that was my first kind of interaction at all with what it was, and having to kind of seek out and get some Bitcoin in order to pay for this fake ID. And that was, some time ago. Then I guess fast forward a little bit, I kept a close eye on things. And when Ethereum launched, I ended up becoming a miner. And so obviously Ethereum today is proof of stake consensus, back then proof of work. And I kind of went through the whole process of learning how everything worked, and started on my own personally standing up some mining rigs and participating in the network. However, at the time, my career was, in kind of a different world, somewhat adjacent, but I've been in working in kind of growth and go-to-market functions within startups for over a decade now. So some failed initially, some were successful. I spent most notably a little over 4 years at DoorDash, scaling a lot of the new verticals. So like anything outside of, Nick, getting food delivered to your door, we would try kind of those different types of products. So it could be, I think the one that stuck that we worked on for some time was the corporate side of things. So what does it look like to get catering, for instance, delivered? Instead of going to a catering company, you do it through some third party kind of delivery service like DoorDash. So I was there for a while, and I ended up joining Jump Crypto. For those of you who aren't familiar, Jump Trading is one of the largest, I guess you could say, hedge funds or high frequency trading firms within the US. And they have a lot of locations and presence globally as well. I ended up joining Jump, and Jump is where we actually started an incubated Wormhole. So Jump had a crypto, and has a crypto specific function. And there, we started building Wormhole. At the time, it was simply to connect Ethereum and Solana, right? So I think for those listening, the idea of multi-chain world was not the consensus 4 years ago, right? It was this kind of like hot take. It was if you went on Twitter, you would see strong schools of thought that like, no, the people who think there's going to be multiple blockchains are dumb. Like that's not going to be the case. And so when we did this, it was definitely a little bit of a hot take or a big bet. And so we started, Nick, by connecting Ethereum and Solana, because Solana launched and we said, Ethereum has all this liquidity. How do we get the liquidity, or how do we connect these two? And so that was kind of the original impetus. Wormhole actually was the title sponsor for Solana's first ever hackathon in 2020, which I think is pretty cool. And so from there, obviously now Wormhole connects, a number of blockchains, about 95% of all on-chain activity. But again, I think it's important to note that at the time that wasn't consensus. And you fast forward even 2 years, I think the thought process changed to a multi-chain world, but a lot of people thought everything would settle onto Ethereum, right? They're like, oh, there's all these L2s, everything will still settle onto Ethereum. I think now we're in the world where, yes, there'll be a lot that settles on Ethereum, but there's also Solana, there's also Sui, there's Monad, there's Aptos, there's Cosmos, like there's many chains, and even private chains with institutions, which I'm sure we'll get into today. And our goal is to kind of connect all of those.
Fascinating. I mean, really, also in your introduction to crypto, I'm glad you said that it was for a fake idea, not on the Silk Road. So,
not Silk Road, not Silk Road.
Not Silk Road. Just coming back to the original founder, and I'm curious because jump trading, especially in the previous cycle, was massive. They incubated not just Wormhole, but I think also Pith as well. Very active in the space, especially on Solana adjacent projects. How did you, within Jump yourself, get involved in the Wormhole project more specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So Wormhole actually started, the origin story is it started as like the initial concept was like a hackathon, I guess you could say like entry or winner. And it was done by, at the time, these 3 engineers. And this is the first iteration of what it could have been. And at the time it was like how you would potentially send an asset from one chain to another. And so seeing that, we had a problem. We were on the product team at Jump, and the idea was like, the traders at Jump needed to be able to send assets from Ethereum to Solana, right? We wanted to be able to do that. And so we saw this general idea of being able to connect these 2 chains. And so we effectively adopted this hackathon project. And from there, we kind of built it up to service Jump's needs, or at the time, our own needs. And we saw kind of like how much of a need that was for other people as well, and started to kind of, I would say, spin things out from there. So it really started, like most, I think, ideas is solving an actual problem. And I think today what we see a lot in crypto is we do see a lot of problems being solved. We also see a lot of copycats, right? Like, trying to copy, a project that's making a lot of money. How do you do it quickly, and so on. And I think the thing that's important for the listeners to understand so Wormhole is in this category called interoperability. Very just like big word, buzzword, but what does that mean? Interoperability is a concept that crypto did not make up. And some of you may know that, of course. Interoperability is what we've just adopted from other industries. So we can think about a few examples. Number one is the banking system, right? So banks have their own databases, have their own compliance, their own jurisdictions, all these things they need to adhere to that make them almost like islands. But they need a way, like, Nick, you and I definitely use the same bank, I'm assuming, different banks, I'm assuming. We need a way, if we were to want to communicate or send money, we need a way to make that happen. And a lot of that today is done via Swift, for instance. Swift is like an international banking protocol that helps you wire money between banks. That is interoperability. You could have a transportation network within a city, right? The bus system works with the metro, has to work all together, the payment system. That's interoperability, right? It's just different systems needing to operate with one another. And we took that concept and just applied it to crypto. So I know taking a little bit of a step back, but I do think it's important when thinking about category, the opportunity size, that's what Wormhole is just the interoperability for crypto or blockchain technology.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in terms of like the ultimate goal should be interoperability completely abstract, all complexity is completely abstracted away such that you don't actually think you're working with a bridge at all. It's just all one crypto ecosystem. So obviously this interoperability is, you're able to do this is because you've got numerous integrations. Everything, you've started, like you say, just the Solana and Ethereum, but now you connect to over, I believe, 40 chains. Right, as it pertains to that, are there any new integrations or partnerships you're most excited about or that you're working towards in the crypto ecosystem side?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I think it'd be helpful for the audience to maybe understand like how I think about, chain connections, right? So it's important to connect to every chain, and we will connect to every chain. However, it's also important to note that 95%, again, this is a little bit of a finger in the air number or guess here, but 95% of activity that happens on chain probably happens today across like 20, 25 chains, maybe even less. So our goal is we do want to connect everything, but we also want to prioritize where the activity is happening. So that's maybe just like how I would view when, different parties tout like we're connected to 100, 50, 40. Really the thing that matters the most, I would say the metric that matters the most is how much on-chain activity are you connected to? But I think, when we think about interoperability and maybe the integrations and who the customers are, the TAM is quite large, right? So if we believe, Nick, that there are a lot of blockchains, then it only helps everyone for there to be a consolidation of how those chains are connected. So why? Number one is if I'm an asset issuer and I want my asset to go cross chain, I want it to be, not have liquidity fragmentation. It behooves you to choose one, right? You just want one, because if you choose multiple, you'll have different versions of the asset. So for developers as well, if they want to integrate any cross-chain technology, it's less like developer experience interfaces to work with, et cetera. It's less blockchain. Blockchains have to adopt less technology. So what's happening, we're starting to see this in the category, is a consolidation of interoperability protocols, which is, if you think about the opportunity size, maybe if you're an investor or anything, like that's great, right? You have a winner or a few take all market. And so that's kind of what we're going after. And then our customers it's actually quite large. We have asset issuers. You can break down an asset issuer from a meme coin, which we service, right? Trump meme coin, all that, Doge, et cetera, all the way to BUIDL from BlackRock, right? So that's our asset issuer customer base. And then we have our blockchain, or we would just call them developers. So that's like your blockchains and your application. So Pyth. Pyth is entirely built on Wormhole. We can get into that in a minute. But where we're focused a lot today and where crypto is seeing a lot of, I would say, adoption and product market fit is an alternate financial system, right? A lot of people, Nick, you may know of, like, for a while talked about games coming, and all the social fi and all these promises of like how blockchain technology will take over these industries. Look, I believe that. I don't know on what time horizon, but what I see now is a giant shift specifically on the financialization of aspect of things, right? So we know stable coins, we know RWAs, things like that. And so we're really focused on asset issuers in this bucket. And I think it's an important distinction to make is for those like trying to look at space and prioritize what they're focused on. And stable coins obviously are important. We've got a few big, obviously we announced a big partnership with Ripple, and we'll be working with them in a number of different capacities. And then also RWAs, so institutions, right? If you've been around in the space since like 2020, 2021, you've probably heard the phrase, the institutions are coming. Look, they may have come by 2022. I think what happened was we had a couple black swan events that set the industry back quite a bit, but now they are in fact here, right? So I can look at a Block Explorer link and see Wormhole powering BUIDL, which is BlackRock's flagship money market fund, cross-chain. Apollo's flagship private credit fund, cross-chain, and people buying and selling these investments, using collateral on Athena, using them as collateral on Morpho. So we've kind of, I think, just to answer your question, Nick, is we are continuing specifically to dominate in the institutional side of things when it comes to interoperability. We're becoming the de facto standard for any institutional flows between chains. So any settlement between chains. And that's where we're going to continue to focus. We've got a few big banks coming up, again, to be more specific to your question, but that's like a huge focus of ours along with stable coins. We're always going to give love to the meme coins, but we've made that largely permissionless. So you can just kind of do that with no code on your own by going to our like ntt.wormhole.com, and there's a whole launch pad. So this is a huge focus of ours, and excited to get more into that.
Yeah, there's a lot touched on there. I want to zone in on or zoom in on specifically on the point around obviously BlackRock and the tokenized RWA space, because that's a big focus, as you mentioned, around interoperability and transfers of these assets to different chains.
Yeah.
So then I guess the question is, for your priorities in terms of determining where to expand integrations to, is that driven by the demands of these large clients, i.e., it's like BlackRock says, we've got BUIDL issued on this side and we want to be able to transfer it to a different network. Is that where you prioritize your focus?
Yeah. I would say it's part the actual fund themselves. So BlackRock, part the tokenization partner of ours, which is we've worked with all of them. Yeah, Securitize is the big one. We also work closely with Centrifuge. They actually have a deal inked with Dow Jones, S&P 500, which is huge. I think that's going to be trading the S&P 500, the actual index, backed and signed kind of by the entity behind it is a big deal in my opinion. And then we also work with Mercado Bitcoin, which is one of the largest tokenization platforms in Latin America. And so it's driven by, I would say, a mix of the fund and securitize. And usually they're looking at where there's DeFi demand or net new investor demand. And then the thing that could potentially hold you back, and I kind of talk about that we're in the practical era of crypto. So like playing nice with regulators. For instance, New York has a digital asset arm that a lot of stable coins are adhering to, like PYUSD, RLUSD. They have to get these chains approved by this regulatory body before they actually launch on them. So it's a little bit of a dance where you have two parties, the fund, or three, us, and the tokenization platform. Usually you can align on, okay, here's where we're seeing a lot of investor demand. So that's not that hard. And then you just got to make sure that you view that as a compliant environment. And Securitize doesn't necessarily adhere to the NYDFS like some of these stable coins do, but you do want to make sure that it's a blockchain that will be here for a long time. They obviously have, proper audits, all these kind of things that you would go through for compliance. But I would say it's a combination of those things. And the one thing that I think is really important is we kind of have been in an era and are just really ramping up from almost 0 to 25 bill RWA TVL on chain today. Now what we're starting to see is the adoption in DeFi. And I think that's what these parties are really looking for, is like, where can these assets really have strong use cases? And so, for the audience, if you out in the wild, and I wrote a post on X about this because I went through the whole process recently, Morpho and Polygon, you can use certain RWAs from Securitize as collateral. You can loop them if you want to kind of lever it up, or you could just use them as just basic collateral, take out stablecoins against whatever. Dina, Ethereum, they have, some of these RWAs, specifically BITL, you can use as collateral, and there's a stablecoin for that. And I think Drift on Solana is the other one I know about, where you can use these RWAs as collateral and take a long position. So it is heating up. We are starting to see it more and more in DeFi, but I think everyone's really looking for more use cases in DeFi on these other chains, and novel ones at that.
And then when it comes to your partnership or the XRPL integration, I'm curious if you could expand a bit more on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we've been working on something with Ripple for a long time, and we wanted it to be a little bit more holistic. Obviously, Ripple's working on a lot of different things. I think the things that's really interesting to us is RLUSD, right? So Wormhole is successful if the assets that use Wormhole or apps that use Wormhole are successful. So we're kind of in the background in that sense. So just like taking a quick step back, Pyth, for instance, every price feed that's sent over Pyth uses Wormhole. So if Pyth's successful, that only helps Wormhole because the entire protocol is built on Wormhole. And same with assets. If these assets are successful and do a lot of volume, Wormhole's successful. So that's why it's great that we work with all these institutions, but stablecoins are important as well. And so we're looking at RLUSD from Ripple as probably one of the only, at least right now, stablecoins out there that has the chance of challenging the incumbents. What do I mean by that? USDC, USDT, obviously stablecoins benefit from network effects. They're really, really hard to beat over time because they just become bigger and bigger and bigger, have more integrations. That's our hope for Wormhole too, and we're starting to see that. But Ripple has enough resources to challenge that moat. And so when I think about some of the things that we were excited when kind of inking this partnership with Ripple is, number one is RLUSD is very interesting, just because I think it has that opportunity to kind of chip away at that moat and be kind of one of the main USD stablecoins for crypto. The other is obviously XRPL and the EVM sidechain. So Ripple's interesting because I think in the past, if we're being a little bit honest, they've gotten a lot of flack for just and I'm a big fan. So XRP Army, please hold any.
You have to disclaim before mentioning any sort of throwing any shade at the army, even if it's constructive.
Exactly. It's largely there hasn't been as much technical adoption as maybe like in Ethereum. That's what I'll say in the past. However, I do think that's changing. And I think they have the recipe for everything to be successful. Here's the reason why though. XRPL, if you're an infrastructure provider, asset issuer, app builder in crypto, if you are not SVM, EVM, and now Move, I would say, it is very hard to build on a net new ecosystem. Like there's really no before their EVM sidechain, like easy well-known, well-adopted, like kind of virtual machine way to build, right, on XRPL. And so that prevented a lot of builders on XRPL for quite some time. However, I think that enough time has gone by, they have enough Lindy effect that people are starting to integrate into XRPL and figure it out. And they're doing a lot of builder programs to help with this. And then also now they have, of course, the EVM sidechain with those being interoperable too. But I think that we're starting to see a shift in XRPL is what I'm saying. And so I kind of see this as like Ripple's renaissance from like a on-chain adoption standpoint, not the actual token, because, you know, the tokens had such good adoption. They have, you know, so much resources that people are starting to connect to XRPL. And once that ecosystem is connected and builders or, you know, feel more comfortable building on it, I think, you know, sky is really the limit there. And so we're excited to be built. We're connecting to the XRPL. We're connecting to EVM sidechain. We're working with some of their assets as well. So we're going to help make Ripple just more connected to everything on chain, and that work is ongoing. And so we're really excited about it. You know, I think that again they've got a lot of resources to be successful. Obviously, with the purchase of Hidden Road and the tokenization platform, we're kind of key to a lot of that stuff when it comes to tokenization too. So again, I'll say I think it is it's Ripple's renaissance moment right now. I think their tech is kind of opening up to everything else on crypto, and that is a net positive in my opinion. Some people would say we don't need the tech to be open, but it's kind of like the free trade argument. It benefits to have everything be more open, and also they're just getting more adoption for people building on it, not necessarily connecting and taking volume away. I think volume is going to flow in, not the other way around.
Yeah, it's crazy. The stablecoin race is really heating up.
Heating up.
And, you know, I think given Ripple itself, the company, and they apply for banking charter as well. So I think that could potentially up on the regulatory side, Genius Act. So it's really exciting to see. And also the additional use cases they've added to the XRPL via the XRP EVM sidechain. So that's a really exciting ecosystem. We've covered it a few times. So just going back to Wormhole specifically now in terms of numbers and growth and usage, obviously, as I mentioned at the intro, you're one of the biggest, if not the biggest, cross-chain interoperability bridges protocols. So how is, you know, activity and volume trending now compared to a year ago, based like on-chain messages and all that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. So there's a few messages, and I'll explain like how we think about success when it comes to interoperability. It's not chain connections. Remember, it's everything that Wormhole does has some sort of data packet sent between chains with it, right? So there's always, usually we call it messages. You can call it data packets if you want to relate it to maybe more Web 2, kind of same from a high level perspective. So we oftentimes, one of our core metrics is we look at messages, right? So Wormhole leads the industry by far when it comes to messages sent between blockchains. I think we're at 1.1 billion all time. I think we do probably around, I haven't looked at the latest on the 24-hour, but it's tens of thousands of messages. If you think about it, that's a collection of all of our asset issuers, all of the apps that use us, oracles. There's multiple oracles that use us. We talked about Pith a little bit. Redstone also uses Wormhole. And these asset issuers, so every asset transfer involves some sort of message, because what you're doing is it's like an accounting system. You're saying Nick wants to send ETH from here, got to burn it or lock it because ETH's immutable. You lock it and then you mint another version over here, right? So like it's this accounting message saying what, you know, Nick's doing is in fact okay, and you're not double making ETH, which is, you have a big problem if that's what you're doing, right? So every message is extremely important. So we lead the industry when it comes to messages. I think when it comes to volume fluctuates with the market. And this is the case for DEX volumes, this is the case for anything. So why is volume important? And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. One of crypto's main things we're solving for is this alternate financial system. Everything is tokenized to incentivize, you know, a decentralized ecosystem of actors. And so tokens and the movement of assets is like really, really what we focus on. And again, institutions, stablecoins, meme coins. And so we'll typically do anywhere from, depending on the market, 30 to 150 million every 24 hours of asset movement. And there's a lot of fluctuation in where, you know, we will be on that leaderboard, but usually it's within the top 3. And, you know, for us, that being important, we're also looking at who are those other players out there that are doing a good job that we can maybe combine forces with. M&A, like I think that's another thing that crypto is really going through right now, is like this M&A period or just consolidation period, better put. So, helping kind of bolster those numbers and continuing to lead from the front by, is there an M&A opportunity out there as well? So I would say those are two of the core metrics we look at. The last thing I'll say is NTT. So if you have ERC20, you have SPL, these are the token standards on a single chain. There's really two token standards that are just absolutely taking the market on between chains that, you mint into the other token standards. Ours is NTT. So we really look at NTT adoption, how many assets are adopting NTT. I think if you combined all the market caps today of all the assets that have adopted NTT, it's something like 130 billion, which is crazy. But huge assets have adopted the standard. A good example is Sol. We worked with the Solana Foundation team, and they adopted NTT. So, and we see this as smaller meme coins, versions of this like Biddle, et cetera. So those are kind of some of the main metrics we look at. Obviously, largely leading from the front on a lot of them, and have some plans on how we can really juice volume, which is going to be important when we start to talk about fees and we start to talk about driving value back to W holders.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get on to tokenomics in a bit. And just curious, in terms of what you've seen in terms of transfer volumes, as well as messages and adoption of NTT token stands, are there any specific chains or ecosystems within that are seeing the most growth and strong wormhole usage?
Yeah, I would say one of our bigger corridors is actually Base and Solana. So we call them corridors just as like, where we see them traveling back and forth. Just if the audience is interested, a really cool tool that we make everything super, super transparent, like most blockchains should, or blockchain projects. Wormholescan.io, you can kind of see the flows between all the different chains. The Base Solana is a really popular corridor. We see a lot of Solana Sui. Fun fact, NTT is actually not live on Sui yet, but it's about to be. So we think we're just going to see a ton of volume open up between Solana and Sui, because all these tokens on Sui that want to adopt like a future-proof standard are probably going to, adopt the NTT standard. But yeah, I would say the biggest one, and we'll probably see even more and more, is Solana the base. And then there's, of course, the legacy mainnet to Solana. And then, yeah, I would say those are probably some of the biggest arbitrums up there. And then it depends. Sometimes, Nick, if we see like a meme coin season on BNB, all of a sudden we see BNB kind of rise. So it's fun because we can also kind of see the relevance of blockchains as they go through certain narratives, because you see the inflows and outflows really ramp up. I think a good example of this was Barachain. Obviously, we're kind of native and canonical for Monad. One of our competitors was working more closely with Barachain, and we saw the inflows and then we saw the outflows, right? And you can kind of gauge how a chain is doing based on that. But yeah, hopefully that's helpful or answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Very interesting though. So what would have been driving that? Would it have just been the meme side? Because I think Base is mainly, a lot of memes, the Solana meme coin chasers, started moving to Base. Was that a part of it? Or because you obviously on the tokenized RWA side, I assume that's either sold to mainnet. But you see which dominates these flows?
Yeah, I think what's happening is like Solana is just a little bit more straightforward about, I would say, and this is of course just my take. The casino, the like prediction markets, like they're just like activity will channel the behavior in different ways, and like we're just pump fun and all this stuff. Like that's great. I think Base maybe dresses it up a little bit, like the Zora stuff, etc. Like creator coins. A lot of it is another versions of. I do see where they're going with things, and they're trying to channel a lot of that like speculative behavior maybe into more productive or like Web 2S stuff. So I see where it's going, but at the end of the day, like it's a lot of the similar behavior, and I think competition for similar user bases, right? And so I think that's why we start to see that kind of back and forth a little bit more. We used to see it with Arbitrum a lot too, between Arbitrum and Solana, because they had, I think, very similar like sophisticated DeFi users. And so you'd see a lot of back and forth. But as Base has kind of gained a little bit more strength or popularity, I think we see it moving in that direction a little bit. But we'll be working on doubling down on some Base stuff as well. We're working closely with the Coinbase team there, so to make sure that Base is as connected as it can be. So that's an exciting thing coming.
Yeah, the Arbitrum movements would have been interesting, I suppose. Maybe you could have mapped that to growth of Hyperliquid.
Exactly.
Yeah, given that people are bridging to Hyperliquid from maybe being Solana traders. So obviously you guys, and I know it's not, we don't want to dwell on competitors, but there are competitors in the
Yeah,
bridging space. And I'm curious though, how do you necessarily stack up in terms of, obviously the numbers is one thing, but in terms of competitive advantage, would you say from the likes of XLR and Layer Zero, etc.?
absolutely. And I like to think if I know all the founders, right? And respect, them and whatnot. And I like to think if they were all on here, we could have an honest discourse. So I'll try to be as intellectually honest as possible on like how I kind of view the space. It has consolidated a lot, right? So remember, we talked a little bit about earlier the idea that there's a lot of blockchains. It makes sense for there to be few interoperability protocols. I think from an investor standpoint, that's great, right? You want something that has network effects, sticky consolidation. And so we're starting to see that, right? I would say you largely have this consolidation to maybe four-ish players. I guess where, Axelar is done relatively well. I don't think they work with Ripple a little bit, which is great. We've obviously got involved with Ripple to help put like some weight and fire behind things. But I think the main focus is probably like Wormhole, Layer Zero, and a lot of these things, right? So where Wormhole does really well is we have a more decentralized architecture. In the spirit of being intellectually honest, where that hurts us, maybe at least today, we have plans for it being way faster. Is that because it's more decentralized? Like most things in crypto, it's going to be a little bit slower. Meaning, connecting to new chains takes us a little bit longer because we have more infrastructure, more validators to kind of set up with these new network connections. So Layer Zero could connect to chains faster because there's less of an operational overhead there. However, what we've come to see, which has benefited us, is that really what matters most right now is you're connected to the chains that are doing 95% of volume, as I've talked about, or 95% of activity. So we feel good about that today, and we have plans to make this a lot faster. I think we do, if you think about our customer category, just thinking about maybe like a Layer Zero, for instance, Layer Zero does great within DeFi. There's a lot of applications that adopt some of their technology. And I think, by the way, I think there's room for a few, right? I think a lot about this like Uber Lyft, right? There's going to be multiple, or if you're in the US, I know, it's like a DoorDash, Uber Eats, and maybe one other, or something to that effect. When we think about like Layer Zero does really good on like DeFi, like I mentioned. And however, when you go further up the customer stack, what we've found is that these institutional customers care a lot about security. And so where Wormhole is really focused is a very decentralized consensus with the Guardian network. And for instance, like BlackRock loves something like that because it's doxed. There's, Google Cloud and Figment and Course One and all these validators are kind of part of this consensus network. And, I talk about this practical era of crypto. If they did something wrong, like first of all, the way it's set up is you need 13 of them to collude. But if they did do something wrong as well, beyond that like difficulty threshold, you can sue them, right? You can literally say, whoa, I know all these entities, like this is kind of the practical era of crypto. These institutions, like I can sue them. So we've seen a lot of success, I guess to shorten my answer here a little bit, Nick, from a competitive perspective, as we go further up the stack towards these like institutional enterprise customers that care a lot about security. And then we kind of go head to head a lot of the times with maybe a Layer Zero on like a more of a DeFi, working with meme coins, some of these stable coins, some of these native, I guess, chain tokens as well. So I think that that's maybe how I would see the competitive landscape today. Axelar is involved in some of that. Chainlink obviously launched CCIP as well. I think that Chainlink is a really good Oracle product. CCIP is, it's newer. So they're going to try and get adoption of it, of course. But I think that we're a lot ingrained in a lot of these ecosystems. There's a lot of adoption already. So we'll see how CCIP works. But yeah, that's kind of how I see it without being a little too pointed at any particular competitor. But I think it's healthy competition. I think everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, but I think we're starting to see kind of two kind of win the day a little bit and maybe even have their own categories that they're starting to really pull away from on.
Yeah. You touched on security there, and I think that's very important because I think that though the parts of crypto infrastructure that have been the most susceptible have been bridges, cross-chain bridges. I mean, some of the biggest hacks ever, like Ronin, for example. I know, not to bring a bad omen, but you guys also suffered something back in the day.
100%.
And I'm curious, although I think you got everything back, right? It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But more technically, like coming back to, for example, the decentralized components and the other stuff, like how have you made sure that your protocol is like watertight in terms of security?
Absolutely. And I actually don't mind talking about the exploit at all. I think it's a strength now. So like, I'm going to go ahead and plug that.
Sure.
Over 3 years ago, Wormhole was exploited. It was a large exploit. We returned the funds next day, which is very, very rare in crypto.
Yeah.
We returned the funds next day. Trust. We wanted to make sure we maintain trust with our users. And then we proceeded to do an insane number of things. Number one, we hired the ex-CISO from Mozilla Firefox. Number two, we added 2 security features to Wormhole that would prevent what happened from happening again or other things from happening again. And I can get into those. We have an internal security team, which is very unusual in crypto. Most crypto teams use these external auditors for everything. And I can explain why that is important as well. And really what's happened is that experience has made us very battle tested and kind of like tested our resolve as a company, as a protocol for being able to stand the test of time. And we've actually gotten that feedback now from a lot of, just to go back to these institutions, like having been through that and handled it the way, in which we did and come back in the way in which we did, people see it as a strength, especially since it's been so long. It's so long ago at this point. It's over 3 years ago. And so I'm proud of the team and I'm proud of the growth we've had. I think if I go back quickly to the 2 security features, we have what's called the global account and the governor. So the governor limits flow between chains. So for example, there's a dashboard we have. You can see all the flows. Today, I believe between Ethereum and Solana, only 60 million, 70 million can flow in a 24-hour period. And that can be raised. The guardians have to vote on it and anyone can propose that to be raised, by the way. But the idea is if there was some massive exploit, it's limited at 70 million, right? You can't plug more than 70 million. It likely would be lower because you have the daily usage, which could be anywhere from 30 to 40. So that's like one, you're reducing what the potential like damage that could happen. And the second one is what we call global account. A lot of people don't know this, but we actually built a blockchain. We didn't market it, go crazy about it. We built a blockchain. It's funny, we named it Wormhole Gateway. The marketing team did, but for a while we were building it, all the devs called it Wormchain, and the marketing team's like, we can't have Wormchain, like we can't have that name. And eventually it won the day though. Like we tried to call it Gateway, and everyone just kept calling it Wormchain. So now it's Wormchain. But Wormchain exists as a second ledger, almost like a copy of all the smart contracts of all these transactions across all these chains. If there's any verification of this ledger that is off, so let's say, Nick sends 10 of a stablecoin USDC from one chain to another in 11 mints instead, that verification, it will verify that is indeed, not valid, and it'll cut the connection to the chain. Meaning like it's almost like an emergency, like I want to contain anything bad that could potentially happen from further happening. So those are what I call defense in depth. And I've actually done an infinite amount of like borders asking me about the hack and stuff. There is no silver bullet to like Web3 security. It is adopting Web2 best practices, which we didn't do for a long time because everyone was sprinting trying to ship shit and just got like one external audit from an audit firm who's sees the code for a week and has no clue of what you're trying to build. No shade on those. That like it's a good industry and it's absolutely necessary. But like we want to do a lot of that internal auditing, in-house. And the answer, I guess, to say like what does Web3 do, to help with some of the security issues is, I think that one of the biggest ones is defense in depth. It's like you just add layers, any sort of like hackable surface or critical area. So again, the accountant is a layer, right? The governor is a layer. A large bug bounty, we have a $5 million bug bounty, is a layer, right? Because what you're doing is you're incentivizing people to hack at the protocol and report that in a responsible way to get $5 million, then try and hack it. And I mean, we know this now, it's harder and harder to get money off chain and like go hide somewhere. It's becoming way harder, right? Like we have good playbooks for covering the exchanges so they can't get off the centralized exchanges. And it's the KYC route. It's just way Tornado Cash. It's just way more difficult now and if you notice, a lot of it's just North Korea still because it's almost like state sponsored. But it's just harder and harder to hack something and actually get away with the money. And then also like you're gonna have to look over your shoulder for the rest of your life. And so if I can just hack something and get $5 million and be like, hey, okay, That's like a good trade-off. And so that's another defense in depth layer. And so not to be too long-winded here, but I think, a lot of people think about security and ask about this. So I want to make sure I'm addressing it pretty substantially. All of these layers are important and ultimately what makes Wormhole much more safe today. The audits, yes, are great. We have a lot of those, but I think this kind of like layered stack is much more important. And I'll give an analogy to kind of wrap it up. But if there are any Harry Potter fans out there, I don't, maybe there are, maybe there aren't, but it's fairly popular. So I'll give this analogy. There's a villain in the series called Voldemort. Voldemort, you need to kill 6 items. You need to eliminate them before you can actually get attack him as a person, right? So like he's invincible unless you get these 6 items, you eliminate them. So the way I think about security with Wormhole is you need to eliminate these various layers before you can actually have a chance at attacking the vulnerability, maybe a smart contract on Wormhole. And so it's a good way to think about like how the security stack has built up and how it's been more robust over time. So probably a longer answer than you wanted, Nick, to the question, but I think we've done a lot to address the exploit, and we're pretty proud of it at this point.
Multiple dependencies and contingencies guarding Voldemort, except hopefully this time Wormhole does a lot more good than Voldemort did. So
yes. Maybe that's the bad part of the analogy I should have done.
The analogy makes sense. So quickly moving forward now to another part of Wormhole, big component, of course, is, and that no doubt many people who are watching are concerned about, is the Wormhole's W token, right? So it was launched about a year ago. So I think it still is a governance token, if I'm correct. I'm curious now, in terms of as it is currently, how does the governance component work with the token? And then are you thinking about other use cases you want to attach to the token to allow holders to accrue value in some way?
Absolutely. Love talking about this. So today Wormhole is, we have governance, and then we have the staking rewards program with governance, which has given out, a good amount. I think each tranche was like 50 million W. The way I think about governance is, and I think if I was a token holder, I would want to hear something like this, right? So it's extremely important that Wormhole's decentralized. It's extremely important that it has decentralized governance. I think it is also paramount. We learn from the past of projects that have gone full DAO, full governance, and we learn from that. We say, how do I make sure that Wormhole doesn't end up in this quagmire of governance decision making, and be able to maintain its competitive edge in a very competitive sector, right? Crypto or interoperability is very competitive. A lot of BD, a lot of product shipping, et cetera, like a very Web2 competitive. So for me, when I think about governance, it's like I want to make sure that there's decisions to token holders, but I also want to make sure we can move fast. So separating out what those decisions are and what decisions stay with the core team, I think is an important thing, we're working on. But slow decentralization from a governance decision-making point is something I am a proponent of, candidly, and it's in the best interest of the protocol, making sure the protocol can move fast, be nimble, maintain its competitive edge. So Stake for Governance exists today, and obviously the staking rewards program, what we have coming. So I'd say from a staking utility perspective, a couple interesting things. Number one is we have Wormhole. A lot of people aren't familiar, has like 8 products. We have NTT, we have push messaging, we have pull messaging, which we call Wormhole queries, which a lot of people are starting to adopt. In Oracles will use queries to query data. World ID from WorldCoin uses queries to broadcast their ID to Solana, as an example. So what we're going to do is you're going to have to stake, and this is done, by the way, all the technical work is done. We're just working on the rollout. You'll have to stake W as a developer to use queries. So imagine like it's a very common model in Web 2 to say, I want a certain amount of API calls, and you pay for the API calls. So for us, it's going to be, you want a certain amount of queries, you have to stake a certain amount of W to access those queries. So that's one use case that's actually already technically like done. All the code's done, it's audited, and we're working on shipping it in Q3. So that's a really exciting one. And then the other ones I'm thinking more about revenue rather than utility. There's more utility work streams like stake to get access to the network, right? The more assets and networks that adopt Wormhole, the more desire there is to be a part of the network because we have those strong network effects. Everyone wants to be a part of Wormhole because we have that liquidity we can bring to your L1. So there's a work streams around staking the token to be able to get access to the network. But where I'm really excited about is the revenue side of things. revenue is important, and we all know why for those listening, is because ultimately at some point for those people participating in the ecosystem, you want to provide value back to those holders in some way that are participating. We don't want it to be a dividend. We want it to be you're participating somehow, governance, et cetera. You kind of get value over time for that or yield. We have a number of different revenue work streams. Number one, charging for network expansion. So that's like connecting to new chains. That's something we've already started to do. Number two is turning on fees on the front end. So I don't know if you've noticed, but Portal has gotten a major facelift. We're actually going to be investing a lot more in Portal as the time goes on. I think it's extremely important to have a relationship with the user. For a while, Wormhole's just been this background technology, but we're definitely kind of getting more involved in Portal and like pushing there. And so like that you'll see a lot of new features and new things coming out for Portal that I think you'll see exciting. Today it does bridging. Tomorrow it does a bunch of other things. And so it kind of, we're following this fat app thesis in ultimately collecting more revenue to drive to token holders. And then I would say, lastly, there's kind of two ways to make fees on that front end. And, we can get into those maybe another time, but there's like relay and then there's front end fees, and those ultimately drive value back. And then we have a few other kind of more experimental things we're coming out with that will drive a lot of yields. And it's within the bridging space. And we have actually a huge L1 that we're partnering with to launch this initially. But that's more so coming soon and not as public yet. But I think to answer your question, Nick, there's a lot. The W token and value accrual there has become, almost a function within the business, and making sure that, there's long-term sustainability. So revenue numbers get it going up, driving that back to token holders is very top of mind. And I think it's top of mind for most crypto protocols. And if it's not, you should get with the program.
Yeah, no, that sounds exciting. So obviously in terms of the value potential, price appreciation, value accrual, you got the staking locks it up, obviously, and that therefore circulating supply. The revenue component, would that then be some sort of would it accrue as staking rewards, or would it be buyback and burn?
So the thing we got to be careful with is the burn still, right? I think like we're seeing a lot of regulatory clarity with, the Genius Act in the US and some other things, and that's great. But there's still not a lot of clarity on, and I think the market structure bill will help with this, but buyback and burn is still a little bit, I know some protocols are doing it. They have a stronger risk perimeter. They feel more risky. There's not a lot that are doing it, but I know some of them are. A lot of them, it's buyback and hold. And they're really just saying, we won't do anything with it. I'm not positive, but I think that's kind of what Hyperliquid's doing. You may know better. But a lot of it's like buyback, hold, and we're not going to touch this. So it's off, it's supply that's out of circulation. So that's exactly what we're going to do. I think right now we're just focused on getting the revenues in and getting them into an on-chain treasury. And then as regulation becomes more clear, we'll figure out if we're able to distribute or able to burn. Obviously, the ideal world is, you're able to distribute, but, we want to make sure we're adhering to any local, guidance there. But yeah, that's the goal. I mean, we want to just be a pass through for token holders and again, token holders that are active within the ecosystem.
Yeah, that activity one's a good point. And right now, in terms of, because of just the main use case is governance, and how active is the community participation in these governance right now?
I think it's more and more. The thing that we're working out though is like, I think as the decisions become more important and more critical to the protocol, we'll see more governance participation. We haven't even, obviously, no one has proposed like fee switch or anything like that quite yet, but I anticipate them doing that soon. But maybe for the audience, one thing, because I know it's a hot topic and we've done a lot of analysis on this, so I think it would be helpful for me to kind of go through this. The buyback and burn is a narrative on crypto that is strong and it makes sense, or buyback and share fees. However, it really is an outlier game, meaning Hyperliquid Pump make insane fees. So of course, if they have like a buyback and burn, that's way more exciting, and you see appreciation when you kind of announce that or do something about that. I mean, with Pump, they recently did it and you haven't seen that. But that's probably more due to the airdrop than anything else. But when you look at other projects that have followed to try and capture the same token appreciation from moving in this direction, we've actually did an analysis of 10 projects and of what they announced, how much revenues they're making, the appreciation. And it is net neutral, if not net negative, meaning like there actually isn't any, appreciation today. And that's because I think that investors are more sophisticated and they're saying, okay, if you guys make this much in revenue, what will that actually translate back to us? And so what we're focused on right now is just making as much revenue as possible through the value we give as a product and we provide as a product. And then, getting those numbers to a meaningful level where it will affect token holders beyond just regular price appreciation with W, but like that will it affect it? It'll be meaningful in terms of the yield you could potentially get. But right now, I mean, unless you're making the types of fees that a perp dex is making, the actual like announcement and fee switch thing is a lot of like crypto theater, I would say. And it's not actually doing as much as you maybe think if you're a token holder in one of those projects. And we did a full analysis, like I said, on this and feel comfortable about this stance. Will that change? Could that change? It could change tomorrow. It's crypto, but that's like how things are today. So we feel good about our stance of saying we're just going to focus on getting as much revenue in right now as possible, building up some sort of treasury that we can eventually share with token holders that are being active in the ecosystem. But that's kind of how my stance on the situation right now, and I feel pretty good about that, and think if we can focus our efforts there, we're going to be successful.
Yeah. And an important component here, especially in terms of the things you guys can do with a token and share that revenue with users, it comes to regulation. And that's a good segue to my next question. And that's, now we were talking earlier, you say you moved back to New York, and it seems as if there's this massive renaissance going on in the US. And we're talking also on the eve of Paul Atkins making one of the most bullish crypto speeches I could ever have heard from the SEC commissioner around just these kinds of things, around tokens not being securities, around ICOs, around developers being able to build on top of protocols and DeFi, the freedom of DeFi. So I'm just curious to get your guys' take, yours specifically in terms of the evolution of US crypto regulations, and also like how this is played into your strategy as an entity, as a foundation, and as a project.
Absolutely. So I'll start by saying one thing that's great about crypto is it's so global, right? Like one of the biggest value props is that like cross-border payments, it's very, very global, and so is the industry itself, right? People are everywhere. However, I think it's important to be realistic that the U.S. from a capital markets perspective is still one of the stronger powers within the world. Obviously, there's a lot of strong other capital markets throughout the world as well. And then New York in particular is kind of the capital of capital markets for the US. And so I think that there's a lot of people watching this because of what I just said. It's very like if regulation is bullish here and it being such a power, that's going to have really positive effects for the industry. The other thing that'll happen is that other countries, I think, will see this and probably say, oh, that's a good example of what we could do, and maybe replicate it or replicate their own version that they're comfortable with. So we'll see this kind of ripple effects happen. But for us, we just got our headquarters here in New York. We were talking before we started recording, Nick, like I think that New York is kind of going through its early 2010, early 2000 Silicon Valley moment, but for crypto, because if you think about Silicon Valley, you have these kind of like brain drain or these like things that attract good, smart people, right? You have Stanford, you have Berkeley, you just have the initial applications that were built there, and now more people want to be. So they've got this like positive feedback loop. And I think we have that from a financial perspective within crypto in New York. You've got a lot of the big banks and things like that. So you have a lot of the talent here already. And so you're starting to see a lot of big L1s, a lot of big projects open up offices and kind of be here for this kind of really important moment within crypto. And so we decided to do the same. Obviously, I'm based here now to make sure that Wormhole can be as represented in the best way possible. We're working with a lot of institutions, so extremely important for us to have a presence here. That being said, I think a lot of the stuff to your point is extremely exciting. The Genius Act, in summary, why is that exciting? Just more stable coins, right? That's a killer app of crypto. We're going to see now that there's clear regulation on stable coins and what you can and can't do. You're going to see more big institutions with a lot of liquidity behind them issue stable coins. You've already seen a lot of announcements around this. And Wormhole's going to benefit because that's one of our top volume drivers between chains. So we're really excited for that, and the Genius Act in particular. Our legal team at the foundation, and then some of the entities on the Hill we've been working with played a big role in a lot of the Genius Act stuff. And then I think one thing, just to kind of tie this back to what we were just talking about, Nick, the market structure bill, I think is important. It will help us understand, and this isn't. When I talk about the buyback burn revenue stuff, like I'm not trying to push this off for 2 years to come. Like, I think that there's clarity coming very, very soon, especially on the heels of yesterday's on Atkins, address. I think this is will be quite clear soon. So we're not sitting on our hands saying, oh, we can't do anything because of regulation. We know it's coming soon, and we'll be able to adjust and do something based on that quite quickly. And so I think the market structure bill is the next one to watch. Very, very excited, to understand crypto not being a security, what that means, what we need to do in particular to make sure that we're kind of adhering to that. And I think it's coming sooner than we think. And once that's out, while that's exciting, I think we'll see a lot of other government jurisdictions across the world maybe take a version of it and adapt to it as well. So I'm extremely, I'm biased, but I'm extremely bullish, and I'm excited for what it means for Wormhole in particular, because we do try to be on the cutting edge of a lot of what the US capital markets are doing.
Yeah, clarity will bring utmost clarity to the space. So, Robinson, just wrapping up, looking forward, what's next on? We've mentioned a few stuff already, but what's next on Wormhole's roadmap? Are there any upcoming features or experiments or something that you think our audience really needs to know about?
Yeah, so we've got two really big, like I would say, fee generating products we're launching soon. One of them we're going to be launching in Q3, so definitely keep an eye out. I can't say anything too big yet, but we're focused a lot on like fees, and then we're focused a little bit on consolidation. What does it look like for Wormhole to get involved and getting some of these other like volume drivers, like scooping them up and integrating with them or working closely with them. Those are two big things I'm really excited about. The other thing is simple for us. It's like we want our team to be as much of a machine as possible. I think this, again, it's a network effects game. Think about the Uber Lyft analogy. The more blockchains, the more apps, the more assets we can get to adopt these rails, the more enshrined we're going to be and the more valuable we'll be long term. And so we're just continuing to grow the team, focusing on adoption of institutions, stablecoins, meme coins, everything, applications, oracles. So I would say there's some big products that are fee generating that we're excited about. There's the business as usual and just ramping that up even more. And then you're going to see us focus a lot more on the front end, a lot more on Portal. Keep an eye out on Portal. I think that's going to be an exciting area of growth for Wormhole. And all this is in weeks, months. This isn't like a big roadmap from an NFT project. Like we've been delivering for over 4 years. This stuff is going to happen soon and fast. And so Portal's a good one, I'd say. And the rest of what I mentioned, I think just we're a little bit of business as usual, but obviously we're excited about where the market's at right now and going to really lean into making sure we're capturing some of that.
Yeah, man, looking forward to it indeed. But Robinson, thanks. This has been a great discussion. I really enjoyed it. Learned a lot more about Wormhole. The future is no doubt multi-chain, and I'm excited for those updates and rollouts. Where can our followers follow Wormhole and your progress? I mean, obviously Twitter. Are there any other places they can follow you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky. We pretty much got Wormhole domain everywhere across all social media. The only one actually, YouTube, is Wormhole Crypto, but we're working on Wormhole there. But any website, any social media account is Wormhole. Mine, Twitter, and I tweet a lot about Wormhole. Maybe there's some alpha in those tweets. It's just Robinson. It's just my first name at Robinson. So if you want to follow along more closely, I'm usually pretty vocal and responsive in DMs as well. So those are probably the two best areas. And yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. Really appreciate the time.
No worries, man. And congrats on being able to secure all of that prime real estate for Wormhole across all of the socials with domain and Robinson on Twitter. That must have got that. It's an OG. That must be an OG account then.
Yeah. Well, there's been a recent transition, but yeah, it was time. It was time for it to happen.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot, man. And pleasure having you on.
Thanks, Nick.
Go on. Cheers.